It doesn't matter who a person is. When God wants to reach a heart, I don't care if they're the king, the emperor, or the guy lining cardboard in Calcutta. God will reach out to seeking hearts. I'd like to tell you about the Albanian Beach Boys. We had plans for nearly every country in Eastern Europe, but none for Albania. I mean, nobody had plans for Albania. It was the most closed country on the planet, along with North Korea and Mongolia. Those were the big three that missiologists, the people that study missions, always talked about being so tight, so constricted. This is the only country in the world where it was officially and legally required that you be an atheist if you were a citizen. And if anything else, you went to prison or you were executed. I remember we were standing on the island of Corfu looking across, the 6 kilometers to Albania, thinking there's no way anything can happen there. This is like a prison for 4.5 million people. And someone did have a plan. In 1985, they were going to take these either New Testament or Gospel marks, they were going to put them in the Ziploc bags, they were going to blow them up with air, then at the right time they would throw them in the water and hope they would float into shore. Now, can you imagine a corporation having that as a sales plan? They'd fire the guy. Came up with that idea. And that's what Albania was like. So in 1991, all of a sudden, the Jesus Film office gets a phone call from a guy and said, hey, we would like to talk about having a Jesus film premiere. Now, the Jesus film is the story of the life of Jesus out of the Gospel of Luke, and this was a year and a half after the Berlin Wall fell. And so we went in August of 1991. They said, oh, we will take you to Durrës. It's a very nice beach there. And we walked out on the beach, and I looked like Joe Tourist. I had the camera, and I had my jeans on and everything. And as we went towards the beach, past the hotel, it's like everybody who looked at us, it was like this major parting of the water, because prior to that, any unauthorized contact with a foreigner was 5 years in prison. And so literally, it was like the water parted in front of us. People just moved out of the way because they're so afraid to even be near us. But as we were there, we looked down to the left, and here were these 3 guys. And I mean, these are like the kings of the beach. And you just look at them, you go, they're not here to look at the girls. They're here so the girls can look at them. I mean, girls, take a look. That type of attitude. And as they were coming closer, I said to them, they're not going to be afraid to talk to us. They were really into it with themselves. And all of a sudden they looked up, and this one guy, who we found out later, his name is Leonard, I said, hey, you're from the West. What do you do for your life? And I said, I have the most amazing job on the planet. And I said, I get to go around and I get to tell people how they can know Jesus Christ personally, which gives them a relationship with God. And this flip attitude, like all of a sudden he says, he turns to the guys, he says, wasn't it 5 minutes ago we were talking, we said, we've got to find someone to tell us about Jesus. And he looked right at me, he says, will you tell me about Jesus? And for the next 45 minutes, we shared Christ with them, how they could know him. I mean, they're seeking God. They want to find out about Jesus. And I just happened to be there. I don't think that's a coincidence. I really don't. So fast forward to December, we came for the Jesus film premiere at the Palace of Congress. This is where the Communist Party laws were passed that resulted in the deaths of so many Christians in the country. And as people watched the Jesus film, we literally had 2,200 people in there. And as they started, people were just weeping. And as we looked out of the building, there was literally thousands of people waiting to get in. And as we were standing at the back of the auditorium, I looked down at the stage, and all of a sudden from backstage, these 2 guys in army fatigues come out. And all of a sudden, they look up at me, and I'm looking down at them, and they go, Don! They kind of start running up the aisle. Boom! Hug me. And it's Leonard. And they said, we debated it for a month, but we've all received Christ. We've asked Jesus into our life. And I said, wait a minute, before we say anything, let me just ask you something. I said, that August when I was with you and we shared about Jesus. Is that the first time you ever heard anything about the Lord? He says, well, yes and no. And I said, no? He says, about 5 years ago, he says, it was really, and he kind of looked around. It was kind of interesting. He says, I live in Durrës, and I work for the Coast Guard. And one day, it was 5 or 6 years ago, he says, all of a sudden there's this thing on the beach. And I went over and I picked it up. And I opened it. And he says, and there was a book inside. And I go, wait a minute. Was it a New Testament, a Gospel of Mark? He goes, how do you know? I said, I know the guys that did that. I said, what did you do? He said, I had to decide right then if I was willing to risk 5 years in prison and keep the book or just throw it away. I said, you kept it, didn't you? And he said, yes, but I've never told anybody until tonight. God will move heaven and earth to bring his word to anyone who wants it, even in the most close country on the planet. I'm absolutely convinced there is no such thing as heathen will never hear. If your heart wants to know, God will do it for you. Do you really want to know?